deswegen, wie der Walter schon sagte, hier, ja.
The flag was more than death. Forward, forward. Bring out the glorious fanfares. I still remember, youth doesn't know any danger. That's how it went. With fists we meet whoever stands against us. The flag is more than the death. That's how it went.
I'd never met an Englishman, but I hated them. It was a long time until the hate went away. We were so fanatic back then. But then you'll also ask yourself, why did it have to happen in the first place? So today, former enemies are now friends. So couldn't we have been friends back then as well?
You have to imagine a ship so powerful it could bring an entire nation to its knees. For me, the Bismarck was the Death Star. It was a kind of mechanized warfare that hopefully will never exist again. It was this monstrous piece of steel that held together no matter what the British could throw at it. And when it finally sank, it became a legend with the same kind of force in the human imagination that Titanic had.
Considered by most naval experts to be the most perfectly equipped fighting ship in the world, was spotted leaving the Norwegian port of Bergen for the high seas. Britain's largest warship, the Hood, joined in the hot pursuit. Events were to end tragically for the majestic English craft as she was sunk by the Bismarck during the ensuing battle. But England was to have its revenge. The battleships Rodney and King George steamed to the scene along with over 100 other vessels. After a pursuit of almost 2,000 miles, the Armada caught up with the Bismarck some 400 miles west of Brest, France. It was the Dorsetshire who finally landed the coup de grace that sunk the mighty German battle wagon. Only 100 of her crew could be saved. The rest had gone down with their ship. The highly vaunted Bismarck had been sent to the bottom in one of the most historic moments of World War II.
On the 60th anniversary of Bismarck's sinking, a handful of survivors come together to remember the past. This year, in an extraordinary gesture, they have also invited the men from the English ships who sank them.
That was my station up there. On the King George V.
Once they met as enemies. Now, 6 decades later, they meet as friends.
You know, the amazing thing is, you know, here are these guys that are like 78, 79, 80, one of them is 84, and you can see why they're survivors. You know, here you had hundreds and hundreds of men going into the cold, you know, North Atlantic waters, and these are the guys that made it. I mean, you can see why, because they have the will to live. They're healthy. They're fit. You know, 80-year-old guys that could probably run me around the block. I really admire them. You know, you can really see that they have a spirit of life about them.
That you? Handsome devil. He was an officer. Yeah.
And I saw every shell coming towards us.
You can actually see them in the air?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
And we saw all ours going towards the Bismarck.
I wasn't aware of that. You can actually see the shell in the air.
Well, I was.
Yeah.
I think, you know, we're obviously talking to the ones that want to be interviewed and the ones that can talk about it. So they've made their peace with it, or they feel that the need to have people remember what happened is greater than whatever their pain might be in going back to that place in their lives and in their memory. But I know that they've said that when they went back home after the war, they couldn't tell their friends. There were, you know, there were things they couldn't talk about because people would not understand.
What did you feel when you saw Bismarck for the very first time, when you walked up to the ship?
Ein sehr großes Schiff hier. Und,
Well, it was a very big ship. And I thought, when you get on this ship, nothing can happen to you. Everyone believes she was unsinkable, so you felt safe too.
Der Eindruck war ein gewaltiger, man sieht ein gewaltiges
Magnificent.
Schiff. Das modernste
Overwhelming.
Schiff der damaligen
The size of the ship, as you can see here, was amazing.
Ein modernes Schiff.
The most modern ship of its time.
Ich war alle Schiffe,
Every
die
ship
nach
that
uns
came
kamen,
after the Bismarck
kamen aus
had
den
learned from
Erfahrungen
it,
von uns.
learned from us.
Es ist sicherlich nichts Geheimes, wenn wir heute.
Back then, I was 18 years old, and I, and many others, of course, we were convinced this is the right thing to do. Now, well, everyone knows better.
From the time Bismarck set out on its first sea campaign, Operation Rhine, it only lived 9 days. These men were among the 115 sailors who survived. 2,300 of their shipmates perished. Jim Cameron arrives in Germany with a crew of 32 technicians, scientists, historians, and Bismarck survivors to meet the Russian oceanographic ship, the academic Keldysh.
Very warm.
Among the 90-member Russian crew are many old friends from Cameron's 2 prior expeditions.
Hi, Olga. How you doing? Good to see you. Mir's okay?
It has taken a year for the expedition team to prepare for the technical challenges of exploring the Bismarck.
I enjoy this. To me, it's an alternative to making movies, which is as technically challenging as emotionally challenging. And it's something that I can use my skills as a filmmaker, but it's not just about the filmmaking. It's about creating the technology. It's about the personal challenge of actually going into this hostile environment, doing things right, doing things safely, and coming back with results. You know, and I find that very exciting.
Hello, Walter. Hello, Carl. Here we are. Welcome aboard the Keldysh.
I've done so much work at the Titanic wreck over 2 expeditions and never really had access to the survivors, their perspective, their emotional perspective. So I've always had to wonder, I've always had to create it in my mind based on things that might have been written. But having them right here gives it an immediacy.
It's a real pleasure to drive down this beautiful canal with the green scenery on both sides of us. And it reminds me of when I went through the canal. I went through it twice during that period.
When Bismarck first became operational, she set out for the North Sea through the Kiel Canal to begin her sea trials. 6 decades later, Keldysh retraces the same path.
Looking back, I would say that we have been used by the government of the time. As young men, we risk our lives. But for whom?
Well, that's how we grew up. I was born in 1923. When Hitler came to power, I was 10. Then we went through the whole drill, young folk, Hitler Youth, and on Saturdays there was national holiday. That's when we did all kinds of sports, shooting exercises and so weiter and so weiter. I was in the Marine Hitler Youth. The ulterior motive was play and prepare for the real thing.
Today, Adolf Hitler is an icon of evil. But to Karl and Walter, and thousands of boys like them, he was a living god. He guided them beyond morality, swept them up in the hysteria of the Nazi cult. He channeled their anger and their patriotic spirit with calculated precision, capturing young hearts better than the biggest rock star. They felt strong, proud, a part of something great and immortal. Nothing could touch them. Thoughts of death, either their own or the murders they were being sent out to commit, were drowned out by the roar of the Sieg Heil. Sieg Heil!
We just have to admit, our generation would have gone to hell and back for Hitler. Everyone can hear that from me.
It sounds crazy, but we were proud to die for the fatherland. But that's the way it was. As if you were a hero to do so.
What you see here is where the Bismarck was built. This entire area, the Helling, is where she was built and let down into the water.
Tauche ist dicht auf den Namen Bismarck.
Bismarck was built in secret in Hamburg and launched in 1939. It was the embodiment of Hitler's vast ego in a cathedral of steel. It was the ultimate killing machine, the Death Star of its time. At 830 feet, it was almost as long as the Titanic, but it was 30 feet wider and so heavily armored, it weighed almost twice as much. Despite its mass, it could make 32 knots, driven by engines generating 150,000 horsepower. Each barrel of its 15-inch guns weighed 250,000 pounds. They could destroy a ship over 15 miles away. The side armor was an advanced formula Krupp steel, 13 inches thick, designed to resist a fury of torpedoes and the largest caliber shells.
On this side, you will still find armor plates from the Bismarck. After all those years, I recognize them due to this incision, made here to analyze the steel. Pretty good steel, right?
The German naval strategy at the time was ruthless. Bismarck's sole purpose was to hunt the convoys in the North Atlantic and destroy the ships bringing food and supplies to England, starving that country into surrender. Sink the ships, kill the crews, take no prisoners. Fast, deadly, and virtually invulnerable, Bismarck was a fierce predator. It had to be stopped before it could reach the open Atlantic and begin its reign of terror. It is the afternoon of May 22nd when Keldysh heads out to the open sea west of Denmark. 61 years earlier to the day, Bismarck was also steaming west into open sea at the beginning of its voyage after leaving safe harbor in Norway. Keldysh has no guns or armor. It's a ship of peace, the largest oceanographic research ship in the world. The Russian word for peace is Mir, and Keldysh is the mothership for two deep submersibles called Mir 1 and Mir 2. There are only 4 submersibles in existence capable of diving to 20,000 feet, and Keldysh operates 2 of them. The Mirs are the only double subsystem in the world and have the most powerful batteries of any deep submersible, making them ideal for lighting up the depths where no sunlight has ever penetrated. The architect of the Mir program is Dr. Anatoly Sagalevich, who not only designed the Mirs, but has logged the most hours piloting them.
Пусть задача сложна, мы решать все должны до конца с открытым забралом.
As the head of the Russian manned submersible program, Anatoly is chief pilot, chief scientist, and the unofficial mayor of this seafaring village called Keldysh. Jim's brother Mike is the designer and builder of most of the deep-sea technology used on the expedition. Mike's remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, will photograph for the first time ever the interior of the Bismarck wreck. They are nicknamed Jake and Elwood.
This ROV is designed to go inside of a wreck. If you took a normal ROV in there that had a tether, it would get hung up very quickly. This ROV pays out its own tiny fiber, and it pays it out like a spider spinning a web, so that if it goes around a corner and goes around a bunch of debris, the ROV just pays more out. So you can go in one window or door and come out a whole different place on the wreck.
It has taken Mike and his team 3 years to develop this ROV technology.
Try to think of every single scenario possible of how the ROV was going to travel through the wreck and what was required. So we tried to package everything into as small as package as possible.
The design is so cutting edge that no off-the-shelf components could be used. Every part was designed and built from scratch. Jake and Elwood each carry 2,000 feet of fiber optic cable. Inside the cable are 2 tiny glass fibers, only half the diameter of a human hair.
I'd say we're about still 2 pounds negative.
Probably want to dive into something negative.
Video of what the ROV sees, as well as flight control signals, race along the fibers as pulses of light. The delicate glass fibers are the pilot's only link to the ROV. Damage them and the vehicle is lost. Based on the blueprints from the shipbuilder, Jim and his team have made detailed diagrams of every deck of the Bismarck. With the help of the survivors, they are attempting to compile a list of access points to the wreck, which might be large enough for the ROV to get inside.
Start with where your workstation was, where your duty station was on the ship, okay?
Dienststelle, zuerst Geheimschreibstube. The secret encoding room.
The wood deck, the outer deck, yeah.
Ich war also auf der Geheimschreibstube.
I was stationed at the secret correspondence room, and my daily duties were to analyze any correspondence or intelligence coming from the outside. We never knew a thing down below. We were kids. Officers were like gods to us. We never asked, and we were never told. But we were allowed on deck as we got to Norway.
My duty station was the writing room, basic correspondence between stations with naval headquarters and the commanders-in-chief, where we would go when we would leave basic mail, etc. The adjutant's chamber was right next door, and he would dictate orders and other information to process. For example, when Hitler came on board on May 5th, his adjutant, Puttkammer, I believe, would be in correspondence with me, telling me when and where Hitler would come on board.
Admiral Lutyens took charge of our task force the week before we left. We hated Lutyens. Lindemann was a nice captain. We all liked him. But the atmosphere really changed when Lütjens came on board.
So, und was haben Sie mir jetzt zu erzählen? Ich mache Sie darauf aufmerksam, dass ich hier auf dem Schiff befehlige.
Admiral Lütjens was known as the man in the iron mask because his face was always set like steel. There were never discussions with his captains. He simply gave orders. Terse, sharp, to the point. No emotion, no feelings. Now, I'm the Bismarck on the 24th of May, 1941, and I'm coming out of the Denmark Strait with the heavy cruiser Prince Eugen ahead. You're the Hood and the Prince of Wales. Over the horizon, I can just barely make out your two ships. This is just an incredible distance. We're both moving fast. I'm going at 27 knots. I can barely see your superstructure.
Imagine shooting that far.
Feuer frei! Hood and Bismarck turned toward each other at full speed, like two armored knights, charging.
Hood fires first.
Bismarck returned fire.
Feuer! Feuer frei! Feuer frei!
When you're firing at 27,000 yards, you're firing salvos. 4 or 8 shells. And you're trying to straddle the enemy's battleship. So you fire off, and you're watching very closely from up in the director tower, and you see the splash of shells. And somebody yells, over, short, straddle. And the minute somebody yells straddle, you start pumping more shots in. On the bridge, they can only count the seconds as the shells fly. And you simply keep pumping in shells all around him, straddling him, still some short, some long, and then finally, the fatal hit. Hit! Hit!
The Hood's magazine has been hit. The explosion breaks the ship's back. As the Hood sinks, the forward gun crew heroically fires a final salvo. The Prince of Wales was seriously damaged and must retreat after firing one last salvo. There were 1,415 men on the Hood when it exploded. Only 3 survived.
Ja, das muss man sich tatsächlich immer wieder fragen.
From childhood on, I was taught that the English were our enemies. I never saw an Englishman. I never talked to an Englishman. And yet, they were our enemies. And when we destroyed the Hood, after all the hurrah and hurrah from the ship, we looked at all the sailors lying out there in the ocean. We didn't know how many had survived, but many of us realized they are human beings like we are, and wondered, why are they our enemies?
Walter and Carl have awoken before dawn to stand and honor the men of the HMS Hood who died at this moment 61 years ago. On that other morning, Carl, Walter, and the rest of the crew felt only the thrill of victory. They had vanquished the mighty Hood and bloodied the Prince of Wales. They were heroes of the fatherland. Bismarck was invincible. In England, the news of Hood's sinking was devastating. Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of England and fierce adversary to Hitler, understood instantly the terrible blow which had been dealt.
The reaction was one first of disbelief and then of a national tragedy. The Hood was almost a loved ship. She'd been adopted by the British nation. She was the symbol of the Royal Navy.
And now that symbol had been destroyed with what seemed contemptuous ease. It was a mortal blow to the English spirit at a critical moment. At that time, the English were terrorized by the nightly horrors of the Blitz, and starving as their supply lines were slowly strangled. The Nazi juggernaut seemed unstoppable. Churchill understood the stakes and responded with calculated fury. He pulled his naval forces from all points of the compass to converge on the Bismarck.
There is absolutely nothing as vital to the nation at this moment as the destruction of the Bismarck. I don't care how you do it. You must sink the Bismarck.
I am getting very strong feelings. The memories are coming back the closer we get. And I can feel it in my stomach. Quite upsetting.
6 decades apart, Bismarck and Keldysh are boring in on the same spot in the ocean, on the same date, and in virtually identical storm conditions. It is an eerie convergence. Bismarck pounded on through storm seas toward the coast of France and safety. The British forces were too far away to stop her. To Carl and Walter, it seemed they were home free.
We still had the hope we could make it. At least that was the case with me.
But fate proved fickle. Desperate to slow the juggernaut, the British launched a near-suicidal attack through the storm with biplane torpedo bombers. Incredibly, a single torpedo made a lucky hit on the rudder, crippling the ship so that it could only turn circles. The British wolf pack closed in for the kill.
I heard in the radio room about how many ships were coming. More and more fleets were closing in, and that we were getting circled in. After that, the last ray of hope was gone.
On Keldysh, there's a different sense of anticipation building as they approach the wreck site, now only hours away.
The RV comes in there.
The expedition crew burns the midnight oil, preparing for the first dive. As a gray dawn broke on the morning of May 27th, the crew of the Bismarck tried their best to prepare for the coming battle. At 8:47, Admiral John Tovey, commanding the British forces, ordered his battleships, Rodney and King George V, to open fire. Rodney and King George closed rapidly, firing salvo after salvo. The cruisers Suffolk, Norfolk, and Sheffield soon joined in the attack. Shells tore through Bismarck's superstructure and its crew. In all, 2,876 artillery shells were unleashed toward the Bismarck. The merciless pounding lasted for an hour and a half, leaving Bismarck a burning hulk. But still, it refused to sink. In frustration, Admiral Tovey ordered the cruiser Dorsetshire to fire its torpedoes. They claimed 3 hits. 5 minutes later, at 10:40 a.m., Bismarck capsized and plunged into the abyss. May 27th, 10:40 a.m., they have reached the site of the sinking. In an unsettling parallel, the Keldysh arrives on the exact spot, 61 years later, almost to the minute. For Carl and Walter, the present collides with the past. On that other gray morning, thousands of their shipmates plunged into the depths and lie entombed now beneath them.
Im Namen der Kameradschaft Schlachtschiff Bismarck.
We, the survivors of the gruesome naval battle in May of 1941, on this day especially want to remember all those who died in this very spot on that tragic day.
Unsere gefallenen Bismarck-Kameraden.
On this day, we wish to place a crown upon your heads, the crested crown of the forever moving sea. Peace on earth for all time and everywhere. Never again war.
It affected me very much looking down into the water and remembering what had occurred 61 years ago at this very site. Struggling for my life and to realize that I belong to the very few lucky ones that have survived this catastrophe.
So step one is we do a nice pass, nice shot all the way down. Step two, we meet here, okay? And then we do some photography just in this area.
Because it is a war grave, the wreck may not be disturbed in any way. All forensic analysis must be based only on imaging. So the coordination of lighting and camera operations is critical.
Yeah, little moves. You know, we let the current drift back.
Zhenya Chernaev is regarded as one of the best submersible pilots in the world. If it can be done with the Mir, Zhenya will do it.
Can you land Mir on top of this hangar? I think it's possible, please.
Good morning.
Jen, when you're on the bottom, if you see some debris or you find the slide scar or something like this, we just need
The most important ceremony of dive day is the Mir meeting. This is where the dive plans are carefully reviewed.
a plot that we can look at afterwards.
Yes, and if you have time, of course, we will...
By Russian tradition, every diver must sign Lydia's book before entering the Mir. When you see Lydia with the book, you know the dive is on.
Okay?
Okay, дякую.
Поехали. Smile, everybody.
This is me smiling. That's as much as you get. There's always the little thing you didn't think of. Thanks. See you in the sunshine. Everybody's thought about this for months. They've thought about the electronics, they've thought about the optics. You know, we have the GPS coordinates, we know how to get on the wreck site, we know how to get down there. So it's going to be some little thing that we haven't thought of. You know, it's what I always call the X factor. And it might be some little $10 part that fails at a critical moment.
It's an enormous amount of pressure. There's all kinds of things on that sub that could go wrong. There's a lot of places to get tangled up on the wreck. There's lights that could implode. It's a roll of the dice.
I don't have any great fears about human safety. The Russians know how to do what they do with the submersibles. The Mirs are fully capable and tested to 20,000 feet plus, so I feel pretty comfortable there. But, you know, always in the back of your mind is the fact that you are hitting human technology and human cleverness against the force of the ocean. And the ocean is not a trivial force to mess with.
love this. There's no place I'd rather be. That's a whole lot for me like being in a helicopter. I love flying helicopters. So this is a lot like that. It's got some risk. You got to be precise. You got to know what you're doing. It's a pretty scary place we're going to. I mean, 15,700 feet deep.
Mir 2 sensor booms are packing a wallop, over 8,000 watts of light. Mir 1 is also loaded for action with a stereoscopic high-definition camera system.
Mir 1, Mir 2, we're starting our descent. Yeah, roger that.
The dive has begun. The 2 submersibles are now free-falling toward the bottom, 3 miles below. The camera housing, also built by Mike, is the largest implodable volume ever attached to a manned submersible. Any flaw in the design could cause it to implode under the pressure. The effect would be like a depth charge, creating a shock wave that would rupture the sub's hull and kill everyone inside instantly.
Okay, we're on the clock on all recorders.
Okay, timer is started. All 4 tapes are running. This is a triple check throughout the dive. Triple check. Yep.
Throughout the long fall, the pressure mounts relentlessly. It will reach 7,000 pounds per square inch. Nestled within the submersible structure is the manosphere. This steel bubble resists the force of the 3-mile column of water above it. The total pressure on its surface will be 155 million pounds. Within the first 500 feet, all light from the surface is gone. The temperature drops to near freezing. Inside, the walls trickle with condensation. The 16,000-foot free fall to the bottom will take 3 hours. Bismarck made the same journey in less than 10 minutes. As it left the surface, buoyancy and hydrodynamic forces ripped away the stern. The ship plunged, a 35,000-ton steel missile pointed into the depths. The forces of the water roaring past ripped away the Admiral's Bridge, the mast, and the funnel. Righting itself, the ship then fell in this stable position for the rest of its descent into darkness.
That's the floor.
You see the bottom?
20 meters. I see the bottom.
Yeah. Yep, just coming into view.
Beautiful. This is like landing on the moon.
Sure is. Whoa. Look at this silt we're throwing up.
After its 3-mile fall, Bismarck hits with tremendous force, forming an impact crater and hurling up enormous clouds of debris.
Mir 2, this is Mir 1. We are on the bottom. Depth 4820 meters. Mir 1. Глубина 4522.
We're definitely looking toward the slope. See, we're facing the mountain.
Bismarck has hit the side of a volcanic seamount. It begins to slide downhill, plowing a deep trough in the bottom clays. Now 100,000 tons of water sucked down by the falling ship blast onto the slope, becoming a turbidity flow, a kind of liquid avalanche. The turbidity flow shoves the ship hard, turning it sideways to the slope. Pieces of the ship which have impacted in its path are now swept aside. The hull bulldozes the seafloor ahead of it, starting an avalanche. The bow carves deeply into the mud, cutting across the slope to the west. The Leviathan finally comes to rest. It has slid down the mountain 2/3 of a mile.
It's all disturbed bottom, so we're right in the middle of the avalanche. You can just see where this stuff was just ripped up, tumbled. That ship just came roaring through here. We may be actually in the slide scar. You can see the shape of it on the sonar on the right. Now this looks like the slide scar to me. Man, look how deep this thing is. It's like a giant bulldozer just plowed through here.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Just follow the wall. It should lead us right to the wreck. Yep. Starting to see some debris.
I see. Boots.
Where do you see the boot?
On the left? Boots on the left, yes.
Oh, yeah, I can see it now.
Just one boot?
Yes.
It's an officer's boot, right?
Here too, what's your 20?
We're moving south through the debris field and we're seeing some larger objects. Holger, any ideas what this is?
Copy that. Just keep
It's a
on the
searchlight,
south.
Mike.
Okay, I agree. Yeah, there's the louvers.
See something? Yeah, something there. It's big, whatever it is. It's the bridge. It's the Admiral's Bridge. See it? Yeah, you see the windows? It's landed upside down. There's the bridge wing platforms.
Powerful currents ripped away the Admiral's Bridge as the ship plunged. 10 minutes later, it impacted on the sea floor. Bismarck's hull then shoved it aside, and it came to rest upside down.
Really give you an idea how big that thing is. That thing is huge. It's like a 4-story building just fell out of the sky. Admiral Lutyens would have stood right there, right at those windows.
Mir 2, this is Mir 1.
This is Mir 2, go ahead.
Pick that fell first north, Nurse.
You need to come to our coordinate now. We're at the Admiral's Bridge.
We need to proceed to the wreck.
Okay, we're proceeding to it now.
Let's adjust the sonar here.
I see.
Oh yeah, there it is. I see Bismarck.
No.
This is the bow.
Yes, it's the bow.
Well, Jim, we think we're coming in on the starboard side, over. Well, here it comes into sight. There it is. See it, Mike?
Yeah, there it is. Yes, we have visual on the wreck now.
Whoa! Oh my God!
Roger that. Stand by there.
Welcome to Bismarck.
Now, guys, you need to come up to deck level and get oriented on the wreck.
Okay, he's coming up now.
My God, this is incredible. God, it looks like a mountain we're climbing up.
There's the armor belt. And I'll tell you right where we are in a second. You are right here. Right here, Jenny. to the bow now, Jim.
Just coming up to the tip of the bow. Yeah, copy that. We're right below you. Roger that.
It's beautiful. Look at that.
Yep. Wow. Holy Toledo. Oh my Lord.
Мир два. Следите за мной, следите. Следи, Женя.
Okay, we're heading aft along the forecastle, and I can see just a hint of the swastika. Just coming up on the port capstan right now.
See all this sediment on the deck from the slide.
Right.
But the teak is all here. Look at that. Boom!
Yep.
That just went through there, and who knows where that blew up. Probably made it all the way to the turret.
There's that huge barbette.
Yeah, that's Anton.
See that huge opening right where the turret used to be.
These gaping 5-story shafts are barbettes, the armored mounts for Bismarck's 4 massive 15-inch gun turrets. The turrets were held in place only by gravity, so when the ship capsized, they slid out and plummeted to the bottom. From the muzzles of its gun barrels to the back of its armor, each turret was over 100 feet long and weighed 1,900 tons.
There's an anti-aircraft gun. The railings, it just looks intact.
Okay, Mir 2, the next move is to come up to the captain's bridge, over.
Come up, Jenny. Coming up.
But does this glass magnify or not?
Yes, slightly.
Slightly.
Yeah, there is a magnification.
It is just humongous. There's the bridge. I see it.
The captain's bridge, right?
Yep. Lindemann and Lütjens would have fought the final battle from right in there.
This shell damage, look.
That is just unbelievable, Mike.
I told you.
I cannot believe it.
It's hard not to be excited.
The subs head aft over the secondary gun turrets. They seem surprisingly intact. Bismarck's 15-centimeter secondary turrets were as big as the main guns on most warships. Even in her silent grave, Bismarck still seems lethal, with her guns aimed, ready to engage an enemy which will never come. The guns are silent now, the barrels home to gentle anemones. A 10.5-centimeter flak gun still points skyward. It will be an endless vigil under a night sky which will never see a dawn.
Proceed aft to the hangar area.
Continue.
Continue aft to the hangar area.
Yes.
And here's a catapult.
There it is. Athwart ships right there. Yep.
Bismarck had 4 Arado 196 seaplanes, which were launched from its catapult amidships. No one has ever seen inside the Bismarck's hangars to confirm if any of the planes still exist.
Okay, we're just about to open the door here.
Okay, now open.
Okay, I'm coming out. Picking up. Looks good. Okay, it looks like it's neutral. I'm ready to go when you say so. Over.
Okay, roger that. Go ahead and start your work. Let's see you come down to the hangar and look inside. Over.
Copy that.
Yep, looking good. We have a good visual on you.
Despite almost 4 tons of pressure per square inch, Mike's bod is functioning perfectly. Now it's time to do what they came here for.
Entering the hangar now. Copy that.
Локаторы холод тоже выключай.
Voila, airplane. Airplane wreckage. See this? Here's the cockpit. The cockpit, Genya. Genya, you see the airplane? It's the fuselage. Airplane, yeah. It's the frame for the window.
That last night, the captain wanted to get as much information and reports back to land as possible. He wanted to send our seaplane back to land with our war diary. Everyone was giving the pilot messages and notes to loved ones back home. But the poor guy, they couldn't get the catapult to work, so in the end, he didn't go.
So the hangar took a direct hit, right?
Direct hit, yep.
No, it blew the tail of that Arado to smithereens. It's an out-of-body experience, absolutely. It's like you become the bot, and you forget where you are. You see the sub, and you say, there's Mir 2 over there. But wait a minute, I'm in Mir 2.
After 9 hours on the bottom, the Mir's power is getting low. It's time to make the long climb back to the surface. But first, Elwood needs to make it safely back into the garage. Without the daring and the skill of Mir cowboys like Vladimir Petrovsky, it would not be possible to recover the Mirs. After a rough ride on the surface, the dive crew really appreciates what the cowboys go through to get them safely back on board.
It's a spectacular sight. Absolutely spectacular.
Hey.
Walter,
He's been
well,
waiting all day.
Your ship is in pretty good shape.
Is it?
Yeah. Just comes out of the blackness, has this kind of ghostly pale wall of steel. Very different look than Titanic.
It was just exciting. I mean, my God, come along the ocean bottom. We just climbed up and up and up and up. Felt like I was going up a skyscraper.
That's what I need you to do.
Maintenance on Elwood is a lot like a surgical procedure. The fluid-compensated electronics are like a circulatory system, which must be given a transfusion during the operation.
Does the patient live, yeah?
Yeah, the patient's going to live, I think. The spot is alive.
Laurie Johnson is a microbiologist who specializes in the study of microorganisms in extreme environments.
It's not just one type of bacteria down there. It's a community or a consortia. So it's a whole bunch of bacteria working in a symbiotic relationship by mining or taking the elements out of the steel, and they're using it to build those icicle-looking structures called rusticles. The rusticles themselves are a living entity.
Landing year one, right over here. You guys are going to land.
Laurie prepares for her dive to place rusticle growth experiments at the wreck. She will become the second woman ever to dive below 15,000 feet.
It's just going to be incredible to see in real living color.
Yeah, we're very close to something, Toya. Do you see this thing, Toya? What do you, can you see what it is? Hey, Mike, what do you think this thing is?
What else would be a round structure with various levels other than the core trunk of the turret?
Yeah, this is the tower of a gun turret. You know, big main turret has this long tower underneath.
The turrets, weighing 1,900 tons each, slammed into the seafloor and were instantly buried. Their substructure towers were 4 decks high and had duty stations for 21 men. Now they stand over the turrets like monuments. The team is able to identify this turret by the number of its platforms and its position in the debris field. It is turret Dora, the gun farthest aft. During Bismarck's final minutes, Carl, Walter, and Heinz took shelter behind Dora just before diving into the sea.
But very interesting, guys. I think there is a barrel sticking up out of the mud. It's just, I think, to your left slightly.
Roger that, we see it.
Mir 2 lands midships next to the starboard catapult track to deploy Elwood for a more ambitious exploration of the wreck.
Okay, come on out.
Okay, I'm coming out. I got fiber out.
Tell me when you're trimmed.
Will you talk to him, Laurie, please? Tell him I'm trim.
Elwood is now trimmed, over.
Copy that, looking good.
Most of the British shelling came from port, leaving the upper decks severely damaged on this side. There's heavy rustical growth where fire stripped away the paint, indicating that this part of the ship was a raging inferno during the final battle.
Battle damage. Tell him it's really badly blown apart.
The alley is blown apart. Lots of wires and battle damage, over.
Can you guys continue to starboard and image this gun, which I think is S3, over?
Roger that. We're moving forward now. We're coming in on what looks like a shell hit.
All the secondary turrets have 1 or more entry holes from medium caliber rounds, 6 or 8 inch shells which punch through the armor to detonate inside, killing the gun crews instantly.
So here's the barbette for turret Dora. The tower underneath the turret, out in the debris field, it went in here.
The main armament turrets fired 15-inch shells, which was so massive they required a hydraulic system to lift, load, and fire them. The shells weighed over a ton and traveled at 2.5 times the speed of sound. At impact, the armor-piercing shell burst through, hurling off lethal shrapnel as well as a piece of the armor called the cartwheel, which becomes a second supersonic projectile. Cartwheel and shell then punch through inner walls, throwing off more deadly shrapnel. After a delay of 1/100th of a second, the shell explodes, deep inside the ship to kill the maximum number of people.
That shell might have blown up from underneath for all we know. It might have blown the radio room right out. So
the British used the same type of armor-piercing shells. But did the British fire truly sink the Bismarck? By analyzing the battle damage, Mike and Jim hope to resolve a 6-decade-old controversy.
You go all the way across the ship.
Was Bismarck sunk by shells and torpedoes, as the British claim?
It was the Dorsetshire who finally landed the coup de grace that sunk the mighty German battle wagon.
Or was she scuttled by her own crew, as the German survivors have always said?
We blew up the ship. There were orders to set charges and blow up the ship.
Each side has its own reasons to claim the final sinking. The British because of what happened to the Hood. And the Germans who want to believe that they had some control over their own fate in those final hours.
We gotta weigh in.
Only a systematic damage survey from end to end, inside and out, can resolve the debate.
I want to do a complete scan of the hull, all the way around, down here, to map all the holes and all the damage.
Mir 1 free falls toward Bismarck's impact crater, 2/3 of a mile upslope from the main wreck.
Yeah, I see something.
Yeah, something interesting.
Something very interesting.
We should be careful here.
Yeah.
I think this is crater. Jim,
We're in.
This is a little dangerous.
Yeah, you need to come up. We're on top of something. This is part of the ship.
I can go to this.
You need to come up, Anatoly. Come up. Come up. You're landing on something. Go up. Go up. Go up. Go up. Don't back up. You don't know what's behind you. You have to come up. You have to come up.
Yeah, very heavy.
The enormous piece of hull lying far from the Bismarck is a mystery. Later, it will prove to be the key to unraveling the secrets of the wreck.
We landed right on that son of a bitch, whatever it was.
Just coming. This crater.
Yeah, with a ship in it. Yeah. That's about as exciting as I wanted to get. You just see us landing right on something that like hooks us, you know? All right, good work. You got us out of it. He flew out of it.
They begin their damage survey at the bow.
Okay, I see something.
They identify a historically important shell hit. As the Hood was sinking, the Prince of Wales was wounded and under heavy bombardment. Fighting back desperately, its gun crew scored a critical hit on Bismarck. The shell blasted right through the bow from port to starboard, leaving an exit hole 6 feet across.
That's a big Audi. That's the exit one right there.
Damage reports came to the bridge. Prince of Wales had scored 2 hits from 14,000 yards. The shot through the bow was above the waterline, but thousands of tons of water were pouring in because of the storm swell. The other round hit below the side armor, flooding a boiler room and causing a 9-degree list to port. The damage forced Lindemann to back off from his top speed, by just a few knots, but enough to ultimately seal Bismarck's fate.
Switchmaster Mir breaker 24-volt on position.
Jim prepares to pilot Elwood deep inside the wreck.
ROV power. You get a fantastic perspective on these wrecks that you don't get flying around them in a sub. You really are like a person, you know, like it would have looked to somebody walking the decks at that time.
On the starboard side, a shell hole near Carl's office looks as if it might be just big enough to get inside. It's a risky maneuver.
We're gonna try to go in this hole, okay? But whether it's even bot rated, I have no idea. For better or worse, we're going in. Not even sure I can fit in here. Okay, we fit.
Yep, you got it.
Well, we're officially inside the ship. God, look at the damage. Kabang. Now, if I turn to my right, There should be a door. Okay, there's our door.
Interesting, the growth around that door.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into something.
I think we're going into Carl's office. This should be Carl's office. This is where he worked. This is right next to the adjutant's office. This is Carl's duty station. Check it out. You see the chair? So you have to tell us if it looks familiar. Two tables. Table and a table.
Fordi der var egentlig sådan regal i.
Some kind of bookcase, shelving there.
This looks like shelving here.
Yeah.
So this is a very long table right here.
Tisch,
This is a longer tisch, yeah, that's right.
3 people sat there, one
Ja.
here,
In
the
der
other
lange.
one here. Yeah,
Und da ging es hier
along
rum
this
und da
long-
saß noch mal einer da.
On the long table at the far right end, a
So
third
rum
person.
und dann saß da noch mal einer.
We looked for your typewriter, but we couldn't find it.
Und da war eine Erinnerung wach.
Yeah, that wakes up the memories.
Eine
Carl
Erinnerung
said.
wach.
That's right where you were.
Ja.
One startling feature of the wreck is the missing stern. The last 50 feet of the ship are simply gone. Though the core of the ship was armored, the stern was not, and the thin steel tore away as if chopped by a guillotine.
We're looking at the aft bulkhead, armored bulkhead, the whole stern sheared off. If the ship was intact, we'd be sitting inside the ship right now. There's the afterdeck up there. What's interesting is how all this teak decking failed. It must have been extremely violent. It couldn't have ripped upward. It must have snapped them over that edge, which would be consistent with having inverted, then a buoyant failure where it broke off that direction. That's the swastika. That's right where Hitler walked when he inspected the ship. We're sitting on the swastika right now. This is creeping me out. Okay, there's the propeller. The starboard propeller.
Beneath the severed stern, the dive team searches for evidence of the famous attack by Swordfish torpedo bombers. Slowed by the earlier hits from the Prince of Wales, Bismarck was just barely in range of the rickety biplanes. One of their torpedoes brought about her doom. But no one has ever actually seen the damage.
There's the rudder. Looks like the rudder got stuffed into the propeller. All right, that's the center screw, and that's the rudder. Look, and they're stuffed into each other. And the center screw is all wanged up, which would, you know, pretty strongly indicate it was turning when it happened. What is that? Is that a hole? That is for sure a hole. All right, so there's a big stinking hole right above the rudder. Okay, so that's our torpedo hole for sure. Yeah, let's get up in there. Mike will kill me for this, but yeah, we're well inside the steering gear room now. We're looking right at the aft bulkhead right now.
They have found the hole made by a single torpedo, which changed history.
They know how desperate this mission is. We have to remember that many of these men have never flown a Swordfish before, and if they have, they certainly never flew it in combat. In the oncoming darkness and with the bad weather, it takes them almost 2 hours to find the Bismarck. When they do, they swarm around her, attacking from port, attacking from starboard, but without any regard for their own safety. They're up against a ship that can put up a withering curtain of anti-aircraft fire. And they're flying old and slow aircraft, but they are desperate to hit her. And time after time, they bear in just over the sea, pulling up just above her decks, driving into the anti-aircraft fire, trying to hide in the cloud, doing everything they can to try to bring their torpedoes to bear on her side. It's a courageous attack, one of the most courageous charges of the war.
They launch torpedo after torpedo, but Bismarck evades them all, except one. Incredibly, a single torpedo makes a 1 in 1,000 hit on the starboard rudder, crippling the ship so that it can only turn in circles. The Achilles heel has been found. Desperately, the crew attempts to make repairs, but the storm seas swell in through the torpedo hole, driving them back. They never even knew the full extent of the damage.
Okay, we're looking right down out of the hole. So if I just drop down, I should come right out.
Given what we now know, despite all their best efforts, there was nothing that the Bismarck's crew could have done to clear the rudder.
Lutyens fired off a terse radio message to Naval Command. Ship unable to maneuver, we will fight to the last shell. Long live the Fuhrer. The suddenness and finality of the signal stunned the fleet staff and the radio men on board. Word spread among the crew. Hope turned to despair. In the early morning hours, Captain Lindemann announced that they could help themselves to anything they wanted from the ship's stores. His words were like a death sentence. As the hours ticked away until dawn, the men prepared themselves for their final battle.
Is this damage right here?
Meticulous notes are taken, recording the damage so that the battle can be forensically reconstructed.
Shell damage on its port side.
They find hundreds of shell splashes, telltale marks where incoming rounds exploded against the armor, but failed to penetrate. The splashes tell the story of the massive barrage which rained down on Bismarck during its final battle. Just after dawn, the British Armada moves in for the kill.
Admiral Tovey opens up fire on the Bismarck at about 27,000 yards, and he constantly closes the distance to her until finally they're down to 3,000 yards, firing almost level shots that penetrate the Bismarck through the turret, through the superstructure.
There's no question that they wanted to get the Germans back for what they had done to the hood. Tovey himself ordered the captain of the King George V to bring that battleship as close as he could to the Bismarck so that he can look through his glasses and see big chunks of that ship being shot off. They had her, and they wanted to destroy her.
The Rodney is firing 16-inch shells at the Bismarck.
Blow by blow.
The King George is firing 14-inch shells.
Hammer blow by hammer blow.
And the three cruisers are pounding her with 8-inch shells.
Put her under.
The prime target for the British gun crews was the bridge. If they could take out the brain of the ship, they could render it helpless. The 4-story Admiral's Bridge was swept away in the sinking. But Lutyens and Lindemann commanded the battle from the Captain's Bridge, which still remains. Just after the Captain's Bridge is an armored conning tower, from which the ship's main guns were directed. It's an armored vault with walls 14 inches thick. Approaching from the starboard side, the subcrew is surprised to find the bridge and conning tower almost intact.
Well, this thing sure got scarred up, but it doesn't look like it got blown open. It looks like they didn't crack that clamshell. That's a hell of a door. That is a good door.
But as they come around to port, that illusion is shattered. The big guns of the British Armada have riddled the bridge and ripped it apart.
Okay, it's working. Good. Door's down. Let's see if we can get a look inside. This is the forward artillery director. Well, it was the battle nerve center of the ship.
Chief Gunnery Officer Schneider directed all 4 of Bismarck's main turrets from inside the conning tower. At 9:02, one of Rodney's 16-inch shells scored a direct hit on the tower. The shell ripped across the deck and exploded against the armored tower, blowing off the 14-inch thick door. The concussion killed Schneider and the others inside, ending the coordinated command of Bismarck's guns.
Imagine it rocked the Casbah when those shells hit it. God bless, look at these blast holes. Here, this is where that shell came in and blew right through the bridge.
Firing from starboard at point-blank range, Rodney made the kill shot. A shell right through the captain's bridge.
Boom. God, it just ripped it open, didn't it? I think it just ripped through there, just peeled it back like some kind of cheese product. This should take us right into the bridge, if there's anything left to go into. So this big shell hole should be right here.
Rodney's shell would have instantly killed Lutyens and Lindemann.
But at least we're seeing paint.
Yeah.
For a change. Somebody's office. See the desk? See the 2 desks?
Looks like mattress springs.
Yeah, this must have been somebody's bunk. Big mess. Big mess. Total shell damage. Jeez. It's just devastated. Just molten almost looking, you know? It's like it just must have raged with fire. All right, let's get out of here.
Mir 1 completes the hull survey along the port side. Once again, the hull armor appears almost intact, in stark contrast to the ravaged superstructure. Incredibly, throughout the entire length of the armor belt, on both sides of the ship, only 2 holes were found which penetrated all the way through. Both are on the starboard side, indicating they were 16-inch shells from Rodney. 2 other large caliber rounds punched through the lighter armor above the main belt. The British ships fired 2,876 shells at Bismarck. Over 700 of them were 14 or 16-inch shells which could have penetrated her side armor. The team is astounded to find that along 1,400 feet of side armor there are only 4 penetrations, only 4 hits out of 700. If British shells weren't penetrating the hull, then they weren't sinking the ship. But what about torpedoes? Dorsester's crew claimed to have made 3 torpedo hits in the last few minutes before Bismarck sank. Could these have been the fatal blows? To find torpedo holes, the team now needed to survey the lower hull, down at the mud line.
Mike, we're seeing something pretty bizarre here.
They have found something amazing. A gaping hole in the side of the ship over 100 feet long, with a surgically straight top edge. Clearly, this is no torpedo hole. But what is it? More of the long holes with the razor-straight top edges are found on both sides of the ship, fore and aft. Incredibly, it turned out that over 40% of the lower hull was completely missing. Instead of answers, the divers have found only more riddles.
I'm virtually certain that the piece of red-painted Bismarck hull that we landed on, which was about 80 or 90 feet long, is the same piece that came from the hole, which would lead me to believe that some of the damage that we're seeing is not torpedo damage. It's impact damage. I think the ship comes down, hits that mountainside bow first, buckles, and and then flops down with absolutely enormous force, and the hull literally blows open. Pieces of the hull just go flying off, hundreds of feet long, and then the ship skidded off 1,000 meters down the slope and came to rest. So we may never know what the torpedo damage was.
Only a detailed exploration inside the hull using the ROV can provide the answers.
When the hull burst, it burst at weak points, and the weak points may have been created by torpedo impacts. So in these long holes, are we seeing that one end of the hole is one torpedo impact and the other end another, maybe? That might be a hole right there. All right, that sure looks like a hole to me. Yeah, so this torpedo got them pretty well. Maybe we can get up into this hole a little bit. And we're going in. All right, we are deep in now. So we are right where the torpedo exploded. And there it is. There's the torpedo bulkhead. It's pretty intact. You can see that it's not dented, it's not perforated, it's not buckled. It's absolutely seamless and perfect all the way down. So you can really see how it resisted the torpedo impacts. These holes would have been fuel tanks and water tanks, and they acted as a buffer zone so that torpedo impacts wouldn't kill people on the inside of the ship.
The armored bulkhead was designed to withstand torpedoes, and it did. The thin tank walls were ruptured, but the inner bulkhead is intact. The ship's core has not been penetrated. Without flooding the core, the torpedoes could not have sunk the ship in those few final minutes.
The interesting thing is that everything that we found in this kind of, forensic examination of the ship supports their story and actually accounts for their survival.
Admiral Tovey constantly closes the distance to her until finally they're firing almost level shots.
Ironically, the point-blank range made the shelling ineffective because of the gun's flat trajectories. Rounds were skipping off the water or unable to penetrate deep enough to hit the lower hull. The shells were riddling the superstructure and decimating the crew, but not striking the armored core, not sinking her, just torturing her. To save themselves from this fury, the crew sank their own ship. With time running out, Carl, Walter, and Heinz knew they would soon have to make their way up into the hellstorm above.
During the last battle, it was generally known that the signal had been given, abandon ship. And so, rather than having a special exit route marked out, he simply joined the general pell-mell of people rushing to get out, joined them, and he always kept looking up to see if there was a whole daylight anywhere, and rather than plan an escape route, he simply followed those who were heading up towards light.
Das war das letzte Stück, auf einmal sah ich hier Licht.
He said, I walked past the officer's mess, my duty station, and all of a sudden I saw a shaft of light, and up I went. 200 men are pushing and shoving to get up through the port quarterdeck hatch, including First Officer Earls, who was given the order to abandon ship. A shell penetrates the armor on the port side and explodes among them, killing almost everyone.
This hull was made by the shell which killed over 200 men in an instant.
As he came up here, he went back this way to get to his locker to get a few personal items.
Hier war das Schott.
Yeah, and this is where the watertight door was. And as he was standing right here, a shell came right through here.
saß hier auf dem Hinter.
And he ended up on his ass right here.
Oh, it blew you across the room.
That's a literal translation.
Yeah, got it. On his ass.
Got
Got
it.
that.
Also, ich da Backbordseite.
When I came out onto the deck port side, most of this was already in flames and destroyed. There were wounded men everywhere. And just like the old Bismarck saying states here, here runs blood and iron, literally.
This is exactly the path that Heinz Steg took when he escaped from the ship. He came out here and to the right, see where this fair lead is to the right? That was underwater. The ship was listed over to this side. So over here, the quarterdeck was awash. The blood was running down the decks from all the wounded men that were piled, dead, dismembered, still alive, right over here, probably from this huge shell explosion that was aft by the turret. There's a big hole in the deck right there. This is where Heinz Steg met a friend of his who had his legs blown off, right where the spotlight is right now, according to Heinz. And the guy asked for a last cigarette, and Heinz gave it to him.
Zunächst, wenn ich rauskam, der hat sehr böse ausgesehen. Da waren viele Tote rumgelegen.
When he came up
Was aber teilweise
at Dora, he said it was just a grisly scene. They were dead all around. The deck was red with blood, and by the ship listing, the water was sloshing through the bodies and the blood and sweeping it out again. So he continued towards the stern of the ship, joined a group of about 20 or 25 people, and he remembers that Mullenheim Rechberg was there, and he said, okay now boys, let's inflate our life vests, and then he said a final Heil to the German people and to the fatherland, but not to Hitler. And then Karl remembers somehow they just slid off the deck and off the port side.
Denn jetzt, ich will mich mal ganz simpel ausdrücken, jetzt habe ich erst richtig gemerkt, jetzt geht jetzt an den Kragen, jetzt bist du dran. Jetzt.
He said, at this moment, it just finally hit me. My God, this could be the end. This really could be the end. This is it.
Ja. Und dann waren wir im Wasser gewesen.
He slid into the water in a group, and he remembers for a little while the group was all around him, then they scattered in all directions, and to him it just looked like corks bobbing up and down on the sea.
Alles auseinander. Es war eine starke See gewesen.
The Dorsetshire and the Maori went in to rescue survivors, but left after sighting a U-boat. 1,000 men were left to die in the freezing water.
And on board of the Dorsetshire, we became aware that they could be our friends as well, because of the way they treated us on board. We couldn't have been treated any better. That's how you treat friends, not foes.
Sometimes you'll see a configuration that corresponds to a body, or you'll see the clothing laid out, you know. But you don't know, this might have just been a boot, or it might have been a guy. There's no way to know, you know, because the remains disappear, only the leather stays. Michael Weiss, everybody's standing by. Please read the words on the plaque, over.
Zum Gedenken den Tausenden von jungen Männern, die hier starben.
In memory of the thousands of young men who died here and the thousands who died opposing this mighty ship, this wreck is their monument, and a monument to the madness of war.
This is Keldish. We acknowledge and received your transmission. Walter would like to say something in return.
Roger that.
Wir Glücklichen erinnern uns der Kameraden.
We greet those who can no longer be here, who could not make it home again. For 61 years, their home has been the bottom of the ocean. Rest in peace down there. Comrades, you are not forgotten. We will remember you, and hopefully in the time of peace.
Miradin Miedouard, did you receive transmission? Over.
Yes, we copied you very well.
Thank you for those words, Walter.
Former enemies, now standing side by side. The surviving men of Bismarck, King George, and Dorsetshire pay their respects to the fallen. There are wounds from which the heart can never heal. And though they lived, their lives were taken, shattered, and changed. But they see clearly now. If their hard-won wisdom is lost as these old men fade into history, then it is at our peril. The great battleships are gone, like the reign of the dinosaurs, but only because they've been replaced by more fearsome weapons. Bismarck stands her post in the underworld, a home now to gentle sea creatures, and an eternal reminder of a time when the world went mad.